Most people arriving in town looked for something. She looked like she was leaving something behind. The train had long since pulled away, its echo fading into the wide stretch of open land, leaving behind only dust and silence. The kind of silence that settled deep, as if the town itself had learned not to ask too many questions. People came and went through that station every week. Some arrived hopeful. Some left with less than they came with. But most of them looked like they belonged somewhere. She didn't. She stood near the far end of the platform, not too close to the others, not too far to be noticed. Still. Composed. Watching without really looking at anything at all. Her hands were empty. No bags. No trunk. No sign of travel, just the faint dust on her dress and the way she held herself, like she had already decided not to stay long. Caleb noticed her the same way he noticed most things, quietly, without drawing attention to it. He wasn't the kind of man who rushed toward strangers. But something about her didn't fit the pattern. Not lost. Not desperate. Just present. And distant at the same time. He approached slowly, boots steady against the wooden boards, stopping just close enough to be heard without startling her. "You need help with anything?" His voice was calm. No pressure. Just an offer. She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes for a brief moment, not long enough to invite conversation, but not quick enough to dismiss him either. "No," she said. Soft. Polite. Final. It wasn't the refusal that caught him off guard. It was how certain she sounded. Most people said no because they didn't want to seem weak. She said it like she didn't need anything at all. He gave a small nod, as if that settled it, but he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he lingered just a second longer, watching the way she shifted her weight, the way her eyes moved, not searching, not scanning, just aware. Like she was measuring everything without meaning to. Around them, the town carried on in its usual rhythm. A few people passed by, glancing once, then twice. Not out of concern. Just curiosity. The kind that never turned into action. No one approached her. No one asked questions. And she didn't ask anything in return. Time passed. Enough for the platform to begin to empty. Enough for it to become clear she wasn't waiting for anyone. And still, she didn't leave. Caleb turned back before he could think better of it. "There's work out at my place," he said, almost as if it were an afterthought. "Nothing much. Just something to get by." She didn't answer right away. That pause lingered longer than it should have. Not confusion. Not hesitation. Something else. Like she was weighing more than just the offer. Like the question wasn't about work at all. When she finally spoke, her voice hadn't changed, but something behind it had. "I don't need much," she said. He nodded once. "That's fine." Another pause. Then, more direct this time. "You can come by the ranch, just until you figure things out." The words hung between them. Not a promise. Not an obligation. Just an opening. She studied him, not with suspicion, but with caution that felt practiced. Measured. Familiar. And then, she gave a small nod. Not agreement. Not trust. Just acceptance. But when she stepped forward, she didn't walk beside him. She kept just enough distance to remind him this wasn't comfort. This was temporary. They walked in silence, the town stretching quietly around them, watching without really watching. And for the first time since he'd seen her, Caleb realized something didn't add up. She hadn't asked where they were going. She hadn't asked what kind of work it was. She hadn't asked anything at all. As they reached the edge of town, where the road opened into long stretches of dry land and quiet fences, she finally spoke again. Not louder. Not softer. Just deliberate. "Do people here ask too many questions?" He stopped. Just for a second. Not enough to make it obvious. But enough to feel it. And when he looked at her this time, he realized something else. She wasn't afraid of the answer. She was measuring it. And that was the moment the silence between them changed. The ranch sat a little way outside the town, where the noise of passing wagons faded into wind and open land, and the only rhythm that remained was work, steady, predictable, honest. It was the kind of place where things either made sense, or they didn't last long enough to matter. And from the moment she stepped onto the property, Eliza moved like someone who understood that without being told. She didn't ask where to begin. She didn't wait to be shown twice. By the time the sun had settled into its climb, she had already found the kitchen, already taken stock of what was there, already started putting things in order that most men working that ranch hadn't even noticed were out of place. The first thing Caleb saw wasn't what she did, it was what she didn't do. She didn't waste time. She didn't waste movement. And more than anything, she didn't waste food. Scraps that would have been thrown aside were set carefully to the side. Portions measured without hesitation. Every action quiet, efficient, intentional. Like she had learned somewhere that waste came with a cost. He leaned lightly against the doorway once, arms crossed, watching without announcing himself. Not studying her like a question, but like something he hadn't quite figured out yet. She worked without looking up, but there was a pause, just slight enough to notice. She knew he was there. She always seemed to know. Not nervous. Not startled. Just aware. By the end of the day, small things had already changed. Tools that had been scattered were now in place. Water set before it ran low. Meals prepared before anyone thought to ask. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. But enough that the ranch felt smoother. Easier. And that's when the others started noticing too. One of the hands muttered under his breath as they stepped away from the table, glancing back toward the kitchen where she moved quietly out of sight. She don't act like someone with nowhere to go. It wasn't said loudly. It didn't need to be. The kind of statement that wasn't meant to accuse, just to question. Caleb didn't respond. Not because he didn't hear it, but because he had already been thinking the same thing. Later that evening, he found her outside near the back steps, rinsing something off with careful hands, the last light of day catching just enough of her expression to make it clear she wasn't tired. Not the way most people were after a long day. She looked contained. Like she hadn't allowed herself to settle into it yet. He stepped closer, slow enough not to interrupt the rhythm she kept. "You used to this kind of work?" he asked. Simple. Direct. No edge to it. She didn't stop what she was doing. Didn't look at him right away. "I learn fast," she said. And that was it. No explanation. No past offered. Just a statement that answered nothing. Caleb let the silence sit there between them. Long enough to feel it. Long enough to understand that whatever answer he might have expected, she had already decided not to give. Days passed the same way. Quiet progress. Small changes. And always, that distance she kept. She never lingered in conversation. Never asked questions in return. Never stepped into the kind of ease most people fell into once they realized they were allowed to stay. And there was one place she never went. Not once. Not even by accident. The road that led back toward the train station. Even when errands called for it, she found another way. Or avoided it entirely. At first, it might have gone unnoticed. But patterns have a way of revealing themselves when everything else is so carefully controlled. And Caleb noticed patterns. Then one afternoon, it happened. The sound carried faint at first, just a distant whistle cutting through the open air. Soft. Familiar. The kind of sound most people barely registered after a while. But she did. He saw it before he understood it. The way her hand stilled mid-motion. The way her breath caught, not sharply, not dramatically, just enough to break whatever rhythm she had been holding onto. Slowly, she turned her head in the direction of the sound, eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the ranch, far beyond what could be seen. Not afraid. Not exactly. But something close to it, something deeper. Recognition. And then, just as quickly as it came, she pulled herself back. Hands moving again. Expression settling. Like nothing had happened at all. But Caleb had seen it. And for the first time since she arrived, the quiet didn't feel simple anymore. By the third day, the ranch had begun to change in ways no one could quite point to, but everyone could feel. It wasn't louder. It wasn't busier. If anything, it was quieter. More deliberate. Like something invisible had settled into place and started guiding the rhythm of things without asking permission. Meals came earlier, but somehow tasted better. Supplies that used to run short stretched further than they should have. Tools were no longer searched for, they were simply where they needed to be. And at the center of it all, moving without drawing attention, was Eliza. She didn't announce what she was doing. Didn't correct anyone. Didn't ask for credit. She just adjusted things. Small at first. Then enough to matter. Caleb noticed it the same way he noticed her, slowly, piece by piece. Not because she showed him, but because things stopped going wrong in ways they usually did. One afternoon, he paused just outside the barn, watching as she knelt beside a crate, reorganizing supplies that had been stacked carelessly for months. She didn't rush. Didn't hesitate. Every movement had a reason, even if no one had explained it to her. It wasn't learned behavior. It was understood behavior. And that's when it started to settle in. This wasn't someone figuring things out as she went. This was someone who had already known how things should be, and was simply choosing to fix them. The boy came around not long after. Small, curious, and far less cautious than the rest of the world had taught him to be. He lingered at first, watching her from a distance the way children do when they haven't decided if someone is safe yet. But Eliza didn't call him over. Didn't force the moment. She simply continued working, occasionally shifting something just within his line of sight, as if leaving quiet invitations instead of instructions. Eventually, curiosity won. He stepped closer, peering at what she was doing. "That ain't how they stack it," he said, more observation than challenge. She glanced at him briefly, not correcting him, not dismissing him. Just acknowledging him. "It holds better this way," she said, adjusting one piece and letting him see the difference without explaining it outright. He crouched beside her, watching more closely now. "You always know how to fix things?" Another small pause. Not hesitation. Just a choice. "Not always," she said. "Just when it matters." That was enough for him. From that moment on, he stayed near. Not constantly. Not in a way that drew attention. But enough that the distance she kept with everyone else didn't quite hold with him. Days passed like that, quiet companionship, small exchanges, shared space without expectation. And somewhere in between, something shifted. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted long shadows across the yard, the boy sat beside her on the steps, swinging his legs in slow rhythm. He watched her for a while, the way only children can, unfiltered, observant in ways adults forget how to be. Then, without warning, he said it. "You act like you don't belong anywhere." The words landed softly, but they didn't miss. Eliza's hand stilled for just a second. Not long enough for anyone else to notice. But long enough to feel. She didn't look at him. Didn't correct him. Didn't deny it. She just resumed what she was doing. And that silence said more than any answer could have. From a distance, Caleb had heard it. Not every word. But enough. Enough to see the way she paused. Enough to understand that whatever she was holding back, it wasn't simple. Later that night, long after the others had settled, he found it. Not hidden well enough to suggest fear, but not left out carelessly either. Tucked between folded fabric near the corner of her things, a small piece of paper. Worn, but intact. He picked it up slowly, turning it just enough to catch the fading light. A train ticket. Not for this town. Not even close. A destination far beyond it, somewhere bigger, somewhere distant, somewhere she had clearly intended to go. But it hadn't been used. The edges were still clean. The print still clear. It hadn't been missed. It had been kept. Caleb stood there for a moment, the weight of it settling in quietly. She hadn't gotten stuck here. She hadn't lost her way. She had chosen to stop. And that changed everything. He could have asked her about it. Could have stepped inside, held it out, demanded an explanation that would have been fair by any standard. But he didn't. Instead, he placed it back exactly where he found it. No shift. No sign it had ever been touched. Because whatever decision she was making, it wasn't finished yet. And pushing it wouldn't bring her closer, it would only send her further away. The next morning, something else changed. Not in the ranch. Not in the routine. In her. It was small. Easy to miss. But it was there. The boy said something simple, something unimportant, and for the first time since she arrived, she smiled. Not polite. Not restrained. Real. It didn't last long. Just a moment. But it was enough to feel the difference. Enough for Caleb, watching from a distance, to understand something he hadn't fully seen before. She wasn't just passing through. She wasn't just hiding. She was deciding. And whatever that decision was, it hadn't been made yet. The evening settled slowly over the ranch, the kind of quiet that didn't press, but lingered. The air had cooled just enough to carry the scent of dry earth and distant wood smoke, and the last light stretched long across the land, softening everything it touched. It was the hour where most things felt still, but not quite finished. Eliza stood near the far fence, her hands resting lightly against the worn wood, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond it, not searching, not watching, just holding onto a distance that no one else could see. She had been quieter since the gathering. Not withdrawn completely. Just more careful. Like something had shifted, and she hadn't decided yet what to do about it. Caleb approached without calling out. Not because he meant to catch her off guard, but because he knew she would notice him anyway. She always did. And she did. A slight shift in her posture. A breath that changed just enough to give him away. But she didn't turn. Not immediately. He stopped a few steps behind her, leaving space between them. Not distant. Not close. Just enough to let the moment exist without forcing it into something else. For a while, neither of them spoke. The quiet held. Not empty, just waiting. Then, finally, he said it. Not sharp. Not accusing. Just certain. You didn't end up here by accident. The words didn't break the silence, they settled into it. Eliza's fingers tightened slightly against the fence, the smallest reaction, but enough to show the weight of it had landed exactly where it was meant to. She didn't deny it. She didn't turn away. She just stood there, letting the truth sit between them, unhidden for the first time. Seconds passed. Maybe more. And then, she spoke. I wasn't supposed to stop here. Her voice was quiet, steady, but not distant anymore. There was something in it now. Not fear. Not hesitation. Just honesty that hadn't been given before. Caleb didn't move. Didn't interrupt. He let her continue, if she wanted to. Another pause. Longer this time. Like the next words carried more weight than the first. But I didn't want to keep going. It was simple. Almost too simple. But it said more than any long explanation could have. No running. No chasing. No danger behind her. Just a road ahead that she no longer wanted. The kind of truth that didn't come from fear, but from knowing. The wind moved lightly through the fence posts, carrying the distant sound of nothing in particular. Just enough to fill the space where words could have been forced, but weren't. Caleb let out a slow breath, not heavy, not burdened, just thoughtful. He looked out past the fence, the same direction she had been staring, as if trying to see what she had seen before she stopped here. Then don't go. The words came easy. Not careless. Just clear. No demand. No expectation tied to them. No promise hidden underneath. Just an option, given without weight. Eliza's breath caught, not sharply, not enough to show surprise, but enough to shift something inside her. She turned then. Slowly. Just enough to look at him, not fully, but enough to see that he meant it. And that was the difference. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He wasn't asking her to explain herself. He wasn't offering her a place out of obligation or pity. He was simply leaving the choice where it belonged. With her. And that was something she hadn't been given in a long time. Maybe ever. The silence returned again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It carried something now. Something unresolved. Something waiting. Somewhere in the distance, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a train whistle cut through the air. Low. Distant. Familiar. Eliza heard it. Of course she did. Her eyes shifted, just slightly, toward the horizon. Not drawn, but aware. The same sound that had once meant direction. Movement. A place she was supposed to reach. Now, it just existed. A reminder. A possibility. A question. She didn't move toward it. But she didn't turn away either. And Caleb didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. Because for the first time since she arrived, the decision wasn't about where she had come from. It was about where she would choose to be. And she hadn't answered yet. Morning came slowly, the way it always did on the ranch. Not sudden. Not loud. Just a quiet return of light stretching across the land, settling over fences, rooftops, and open fields like something familiar finding its place again. The air was still cool, carrying the faint promise of another long day, but there was no rush in it. Just time, waiting to be filled. Caleb was already outside, working through the early routine with the same steady rhythm he'd kept for years. Nothing about the morning felt different. And yet, something had shifted. Not in the land. Not in the work. Somewhere quieter than that. The door behind him opened, soft against its hinges. He didn't turn right away. He didn't need to. He already knew it was her. Eliza stepped out into the light, pausing just at the edge of the porch like she always did, as if crossing that small distance into the day required a decision, even now. But this time, there was no hesitation in her stance. No distance held in reserve. Just stillness, and something settled beneath it. She moved forward after a moment, slow but certain, her steps finding the ground without that careful restraint she had carried since the day she arrived. And for the first time, she wasn't looking around. She wasn't measuring exits. She wasn't keeping track of space. She was just there. The quiet stretched between them again, but it wasn't the same quiet that had followed them from the train station or lingered through uncertain days. This one felt complete. Somewhere in the distance, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a train whistle carried across the open land. Low. Familiar. The same sound that had once stopped her in her tracks. The same sound that had held her between leaving and staying. Eliza heard it. Of course she did. Her eyes lifted slightly toward the horizon, just for a moment. Not searching. Not pulled. Just acknowledging it. The past. The road she had planned. The place she had been meant to reach. And then, nothing. No movement. No shift in her stance. The sound faded the way it always did, slow, distant, disappearing into something that no longer demanded her attention. Caleb glanced toward her then, just briefly. Not to check. Not to ask. Just to see. And what he saw was enough. She didn't follow the sound. She didn't even linger on it. It had become what it was always meant to be, just a passing thing. Eliza took a breath, steady and unguarded, the kind that didn't come from holding something back, but from letting something go. Then, quietly, she spoke. I thought I had somewhere else to be. Her voice carried easily in the morning air, not heavy, not distant, just honest in a way it hadn't been before. She paused, not searching for words, just letting the truth settle as it was. Turns out, another small breath, softer this time, I just needed somewhere to stay. Caleb didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. Because this wasn't a question. It wasn't something that required permission or reassurance. It was a choice. Her choice. And that made all the difference. He gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, before turning back to his work, not dismissing her, not stepping away, just continuing, as if there had never been any doubt she would be there. And that, more than anything, was what made it real. Eliza stepped forward, closing the last bit of distance between where she had been and where she had decided to stand. She reached for the work beside him without being asked, her hands moving with the same quiet certainty they always had, but without the hesitation that used to follow. No distance. No guarded pauses. Just presence. The wrench moved around them the way it always did, steady, grounded, unchanged. But within it, something had finally settled into place. She wasn't staying because she had nowhere else to go. She wasn't staying because she needed help. She was staying because she chose to. And for the first time since she stepped off that train, Eliza wasn't watching the horizon anymore. She didn't need to. Because she had already arrived.